That classic scene in almost every massive Hollywood space epic?
Oh, yeah. Two starships, like locked in combat in the dark.
Right. Lasers are flashing everywhere, and then boom, a direct hit. And you get this massive theater-rattling explosion that just lights up the vacuum of space.
It is visceral.
Yeah.
It's super loud. And it is a complete 100% lie.
A highly entertaining lie, to be fair.
Oh, absolutely. But it is fundamentally opposed to the actual laws of physics.
And unraveling why that is, why space battles are actually completely silent, why a 19th century train full of trumpet players revolutionized modern cardiology, and why that famous, terrifying video of a bridge collapsing isn't what your high school physics teacher claimed. That is our mission today.
Yeah, we have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. Because today we are taking your TEAS and HESI prep notes on wave physics, and we're just tearing them out of the textbook.
Love that.
Whether you're prepping for your nursing boards, or you're trying to understand the actual medical tools you'll be using on the floor, or, you're just insanely curious about the world, we're going to fundamentally change how you see and hear the invisible energy pulsing all around you.
Because energy is really the true protagonist of this material. I mean, understanding sound isn't just about memorizing some abstract equations just to pass a multiple choice test.
Right. Nobody wants to just memorize equations.
Exactly. It's about understanding how energy interacts with the physical world, and crucially for anyone going into medicine, how it interacts with the human body.
It's all connected.
It is. Once you grasp the actual mechanics of a wave, you start seeing it literally everywhere, from the strings of a guitar to like the blood flowing through a patient's heart.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can talk about heartbeats or, exploding spaceships, we have to actually define what a wave is.
The foundational definition, yeah.
And our source material gives this incredibly helpful analogy for the stadium wave at a football game.
Well, that's a classic one.
Yeah, so you're sitting in the bleachers, right? The crowd starts cheering, and this massive visual ripple moves entirely around the bowl of the stadium. But no single fan is actually running around the concrete concourse.
Right. They are just standing up, raising their arms, and sitting back down in the exact same spot.
Exactly. The energy travels, but the actual people do not. They just oscillate in place.
And that is the essential trick of every wave in the universe. It transfers energy from one place to another without permanently transporting the matter along with it.
The prep notes highlight that not all waves do this in the same geometric shape, right? Like, we have two main flavors to talk about here, transverse waves and longitudinal waves.
Right, and distinguishing between those two is so critical for anyone trying to understand medical imaging or acoustics.
So, a transverse wave. If I take a long jump rope, tie one end to a doorknob, and just whip my arm up and down, I'm creating a transverse wave.
That's a perfect visualization.
The rope itself is moving up and down, which is perpendicular to the direction the wave is actually traveling, which is horizontally toward the door.
Yep. The motions across the path of travel. And light works exactly like this. Electromagnetic waves work like this.
Which is precisely why light does not need a physical medium to travel through, right?
Exactly. An electromagnetic wave can propagate through the absolute vacuum of space. That's why we see the light from those Hollywood space explosions perfectly fine.
Okay, but then we get to the second flavor, the longitudinal wave. This is where the medium oscillates parallel to the direction of travel.
Yes.
And when I read this, my first thought was, oh, it's like a gust of wind blowing leaves across a yard.
That is actually a really common intuitive leap, but it's slightly off base.
Wait, really? Why?
Well, a gust of wind is permanently moving matter from point A to point B. The leaves don't return to where they started, right?
Oh, I see. So the matter's actually traveling.
Right. For a longitudinal wave, imagine the cone of a massive bass speaker instead. It physically punches outward, pushing the air molecules immediately in front of it, and it bunches them all together into this dense zone of high pressure.
Okay, pushing them together.
Yes, and that is called compression. And then the speaker cone pulls back, creating a zone of low pressure where those air molecules spread back out. That part is called rarefaction.
Rarefaction. Got it.
It is this rapid-fire pulsing sequence, push, pull, push, pull.
So it's not a steady breeze blowing at me. It's a localized vibration that bumps into the next layer of air, which then bumps into the next.
Exactly. That alternating pattern of compressions and rarefactions propagating outward is literally what a sound wave is.
Wow.
It is a mechanical longitudinal pressure wave. And that word mechanical is your absolute most important takeaway here.
Because mechanical means it needs parts to move.
Precisely. Because it is a mechanical disturbance of molecules, sound absolutely requires a medium to travel through. It needs air or water or bone or steel to compress and rarefy. Without matter to push and pull against, there is no sound.
So that completely ruins the space battles for good. Space is a vacuum. No molecules, no compressions, no sound. Utter silence.
Total silence.
But, if sound needs a medium, that naturally makes me wonder how different materials actually affect the behavior of that sound.
Right. And to understand that behavior, you have to look at the universal wave equation, which is V equals F times lambda.
Meaning wave speed equals frequency times wavelength.
You got it.
I always hated memorizing formulas, so let's break this down. Frequency is how many wave cycles pass a point every second, right? Measured in hertz.
Yep.
Wavelength is the physical distance from one crest to the next. And speed is just how fast it travels. But how do those three actually interact in the real world?
Think of it like a strict budget. If you have a sound wave traveling through a specific medium, its speed is relatively locked in.
Okay, the speed is fixed.
Right. So if the speed is a fixed number and you suddenly increase the frequency, meaning more waves are pumping out per second, the physical distance between those waves, the wavelength, has to shrink to keep the equation balanced.
Oh, because they're inversely related.
Exactly.
So you can't have a high frequency and a massive wavelength at the exact same time if the speed is constant.
Never.
But wait, you just said the speed is locked in by the specific medium? When I think about moving through a physical space, it is always easier and faster to walk through an empty room than a room packed full of people.
Sure, that makes intuitive sense.
Right, so it feels like sound should move much faster through less dense things. Like it should fly through thin air, but really struggle to get through a solid block of steel.
What's fascinating here is that the exact opposite is true.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and it all comes down to those molecular collisions we just talked about. Remember, sound is essentially a microscopic game of dominoes.
Because it's mechanical energy being passed along from one thing to the next.
Precisely. In a gas like the air around us, the molecules are floating relatively far apart. When one gets pushed by sound waves, it has to travel a decent microscopic distance before it finally bumps into its neighbor to pass the energy along.
Ah, so there is a lag.
Exactly, there's a lag. But in a solid, like steel, the molecules are densely packed. They're tightly bound together. If you nudge one, it instantly bumps the next one. The disturbance is transmitted incredibly efficiently.
So being tightly packed is actually an advantage for a mechanical wave.
A massive advantage. At normal room temperature, sound travels through the air at about 343 meters per second.
Okay.
But in water, it jumps to about 480 meters per second.
Whoa.
And in solid steel, it rockets up to almost 6,000 meters per second. Sound is fastest in solids, slower in liquids, and slowest in gases.
That is completely counterintuitive at first glance, but it makes perfect sense when you visualize the dominoes.
Right.
And proving that sound needed those dominoes to begin with was actually a huge historical hurdle. The Prep Guide notes this brilliant experiment from the 1660s by Robert Boyle. Oh, I love this experiment.
He put a ringing bell inside a glass jar and used an air pump to slowly suck all the air out.
Right. And as the jar approached a true vacuum, the bell went completely silent, even though observers could still clearly see the clapper hitting the metal through the glass.
Wow.
It offered undeniable proof that sound needs a physical medium.
While the light waves bouncing off the bell to reach their eyes obviously didn't.
Which was actually a point of massive confusion for centuries, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. 19th century physicists couldn't wrap their heads around a wave traveling through literally nothing. They assumed all of space had to be filled with this invisible ether for light to ripple through.
Oh, the luminiferous ether debate.
That's the one. It wasn't until the famous Michelson-Morley experiment in 1887 that the ether was definitively disproved. They confirmed that light is an electromagnetic wave needing no medium, contrasting perfectly with mechanical sound waves that absolutely do. Okay, so we have a really solid grip on how the wave physically travels through the environment. But I want to shift to what happens when that physical energy actually reaches the listener.
The human element.
Yeah, because there is a whole philosophical and physiological side to this. Our source brings up the ultimate cliche question. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound?
I know, it's such a cliche, but it raises an important question about how we define our terms. It's funny how a 17th century thought experiment perfectly illustrates a core distinction in modern audiology.
Because, most people would just say, yes, obviously it makes a sound.
But physicists resolve the ambiguity by splitting the phenomenon in two. There is the physical event, and there is the perceptual event.
Okay, break that down for me.
When the massive tree hits the ground, it displaces air. It creates a violent longitudinal pressure wave that propagates outward. That physical event happens unequivocally, regardless of who is standing there.
The dominoes are falling no matter what.
The dominoes are falling. But the perceptual event, the subjective sensation we actually call hearing, requires an ear to catch those pressure waves, a tympanic membrane to vibrate, and a brain to translate those mechanical movements into neural signals.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Hermann von Helmholtz, who essentially founded modern auditory science in the 1860s, mapped a lot of this out. The physical quantity is just sound pressure, but hearing is a physiological experience.
And this directly translates to how our brains interpret the mathematical properties of those waves, doesn't it? Like we mentioned frequency and amplitude earlier.
Oh, yeah.
In our brains, frequency is perceived as pitch.
Exactly.
A high-frequency wave sounds like a high pitch, like a flute. A low-frequency wave sounds like a tuba. And the notes point out that Pythagoras, way back in ancient Greece, was the first person to really map this mathematically.
He was.
He realized that specific whole number ratios of string lengths produced predictable musical pitches.
Right, he laid the groundwork. And later, folks like Marin Mersenne, who's known as the father of acoustics, expanded on all of this, looking at how overtones create timbre. But while frequency is pitch, amplitude, the actual physical size or intensity of the wave, is perceived as loudness.
And this is a spot where test takers frequently stumble, right?
They do, constantly.
I can see why, because I always assumed a higher pitch was just inherently louder. Like a screeching fire alarm feels louder than a low hum.
They often correlate in our environment, so that's a fair assumption, but they're completely independent properties in physics. You can have a very high-pitched whisper, and you can have a very low-pitched shout.
Oh, that makes the distinction so much clearer.
Yeah.
But the source material gets into how we measure that loudness, and frankly, the math here throws me off a bit.
The decibel scale.
Yeah, loudness is measured in decibels. But the guide emphasizes that the decibel scale is logarithmic, not linear.
Yes, that is crucial.
So, like, if OSHA sets workplace noise exposure limits around 85 decibels and a jackhammer is maybe 95 decibels, that doesn't sound like a huge jump. Why is a 10 decibel difference so incredibly dangerous?
Because our brains naturally want to think in linear steps. We think 10 is just a little bit more than 0. But in a logarithmic scale, every increase of 10 decibels means the sound intensity, the actual physical energy of the wave, has multiplied by 10.
Wait, multiplied by 10?
Yes. So 95 decibels isn't just slightly louder than 85 decibels. It carries 10 times the physical energy into your ear canal.
That is terrifying.
It gets worse. If you jump from 85 to 105 decibels, you haven't added 20 units of energy. You've multiplied the energy by 100.
Oh my gosh.
That mechanical energy is literally battering the delicate hair cells inside your inner ear. The physics of the wave dictates the physiological damage, which is why those OSHA limits are so remarkably strict.
That completely reframes how I think about wearing earplugs at a concert. We're talking about massive amounts of invisible kinetic energy.
Absolutely.
And, you know, up to this point, we've been talking about these pristine, isolated waves in a vacuum, or, well, not a vacuum, we established that.
Right. No sound in a vacuum.
But the real world is messy. Things are moving. Waves are overlapping.
And this is where we get into some of the most dynamic realities of physics, starting with a Doppler effect.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Proposed by Christian Doppler in 1842, and the experiment that proved it 3 years later is hands down my favorite detail in the entire source text.
The train experiment.
Yes, it was conducted by a Dutch meteorologist named Christophorus Buys Ballot. He didn't have lasers or digital sensors to prove wave compression. He used a freaking train.
A profoundly creative approach to scientific verification, honestly.
Just picture the logistics of this. It's 1845. He hires a group of trumpet players, puts them on an open train car, and tells them to hold one single sustained note while the locomotive speeds down the track.
It's flying down the track.
Meanwhile, he places a bunch of trained musicians with perfect pitch on the station platform to just stand there and listen as the train flies by.
What is brilliant about this is that the trumpet players on the moving train hear their own note perfectly normally.
Right, because they are moving with the source.
But what did the listeners on the platform hear?
They heard the pitch of the trumpets rise as the train approached them, and then smoothly drop in pitch as the train sped away, even though the guys on the train never changed the note. I get that the source is moving, but how does that actually change the pitch for the listener?
Visualize those compressions we talked about earlier. As the train moves forward, it is literally chasing its own sound waves.
Okay.
Before it emits the next compression, it is moved physically closer to the previous one. So the waves get squished together in the air ahead of the train. The physical distance between the crests, the wavelength is literally compressed.
And linking back to our wave equation, if the wavelength gets shorter, the frequency has to go up, hence a higher pitch.
Exactly. And as the train speeds away, the waves are stretched out behind it in the air. The wavelength gets longer, the frequency drops, and the listeners hear a lower pitch. It is the exact same reason an ambulance siren wails higher as it drives toward your car and drops into a lower groan as it passes you.
It is so satisfying to finally understand the mechanics of that, but the guide covers another dynamic wave behavior that seems almost magical: resonance.
Oh, resonance is amazing.
We get the story of Ernst Chladni in 1787. He took a flat metal plate, covered it in a thin layer of sand, and then ran a violin bow along the edge of the plate to make it vibrate.
Creating the famous Chladni figures.
Right. And the sand violently shook away from the parts of the plate that were vibrating the most, the antinodes, and settled into the dead zones that weren't moving at all, the nodes.
It created these incredibly complex, beautiful geometric patterns.
It visually proved that objects have a natural frequency, a specific way they want to vibrate.
And if you apply a force to an object at its specific natural frequency, you trigger resonance. The amplitude of the vibration builds and builds, layering on top of itself, vastly exceeding the initial force you applied.
Which leads to my favorite physics myth. If resonance is that powerful, is that why the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapsed?
Ah, the bridge.
I think everyone has seen that terrifying black and white footage from 1940. This massive concrete and steel suspension bridge in Washington state, twisting in the wind like a ribbon until it just shatters and falls into the water.
It is arguably the most famous video shown in introductory physics classrooms, and unfortunately the explanation usually attached to it is wrong.
So it wasn't just the wind hitting the natural frequency of the bridge.
No. Textbooks love to frame it as simple mechanical resonance, that the wind was a steady rhythmic push, like pushing a child on a swing at just the right moment to make them go higher.
That's exactly how I was taught it.
But modern structural engineers attribute the collapse to a phenomenon called aeroelastic flutter.
How does that differ from resonance?
It is a much more complex, chaotic feedback loop. The wind wasn't pulsing rhythmically. As the wind blew, the bridge started twisting slightly. That twisting motion physically changed how the air flowed around the concrete, which in turn fed more aerodynamic energy back into the twisting motion.
Oh, so it fed itself.
Yes, the structure's own movement exacerbated the force acting upon it until it failed.
That is wild. The textbook standard is basically a myth. But wait, what about a singer shattering a crystal glass with their voice? Is that a myth too?
Surprisingly, no. That is grounded in true resonance.
Really?
Yeah, every glass has a natural frequency. You hear it when you flip the rim. If a singer projects a sound wave at that exact frequency and sustains it loud enough to exceed the structural limits of the crystal, the vibrations will stack and build until the glass physically tears itself apart.
The bridge is a myth, but the shattering glass is reality. I love parsing that out. So what does this all mean? We've talked about jumping ropes, ancient Greeks, guys playing trumpets on trains, and shattering glass. If you are listening to this right now, gearing up for your nursing entrance exams, how does this actually translate to the hospital floor?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you realize very quickly that nursing is not just biology. It is physics applied to human physiology.
I like that.
All of these abstract wave principles are diagnostic tools you will use on patients every single shift.
Let's put ourselves on the floor. Stethoscopes.
The most iconic tool in medicine is essentially a finely tuned acoustic chamber.
It's not just a tube.
No, it captures the pressure waves generated by heart valves snapping shut or air turbulent in constricted lungs. It doesn't amplify the sound electronically. It physically channels that wave energy through a confined space directly into your ear canal, minimizing energy loss. When you interpret a murmur, you are literally analyzing wave patterns.
Wow. What about tuning fork tests? The source details the Weber and Rinn tests. I've always wondered, how does putting a vibrating piece of metal on someone's skull actually diagnose hearing loss?
It relies entirely on understanding how sound travels through different media. We established earlier that sound travels faster and more efficiently through solids than gases.
Right, the steel versus the air.
During these bedside assessments, you strike a tuning fork, inducing resonance. If you place it directly on the patient's forehead, the sound waves bypass the air and the eardrum entirely.
Wait, bypassing the ear entirely?
Yes, the mechanical wave travels straight through the solid bone of the skull directly to the inner ear.
So they literally hear it through their skeleton.
They do. It's called bone conduction. If the patient can hear the tuning fork through their bone, but not when you hold it in the air next to their ear, you instantly know the auditory nerve is perfectly fine.
Oh, because the signal gets to the brain.
Exactly. So there must be a mechanical blockage, like fluid or damage in the middle ear, stopping the airwaves. You are using physics to pinpoint the exact location of the pathology.
That is incredibly elegant. And then there is the big one, Doppler ultrasound.
This is the perfect full circle moment. Remember Bai's Ballet's train and the trumpeters, the pitch shifting as the source moves.
Yes, the compression of the wavelength, but I mean, blood doesn't make a sound?
Blood doesn't, but the ultrasound wand does. When you are holding that wand to a patient's abdomen to find a fetal heartbeat or scanning a leg for a deep vein thrombosis, the machine shoots incredibly high-frequency sound waves over 20,000 hertz, way beyond human hearing into the tissue.
Why such high frequencies?
Because higher frequencies have shorter wavelength, which provides much higher resolution when bouncing off tiny boundaries between tissues.
Okay.
Now, when those sound waves hit red blood cells that are moving toward the wand, the echoes bounce back physically compressed. The frequency of the echo is higher than the original ping.
Just like the train approaching.
Yes. And if the blood is moving away, the echo comes back, stretched out, with a lower frequency.
So the machine is just measuring the difference between the ping it sent and the echo it received.
Exactly. By analyzing that tiny shift in frequency, the computer calculates the exact velocity and direction of the blood flow. Whether you are measuring blockages in a carotid artery or confirming a healthy fetal heartbeat, you are directly applying the wave physics discovered on a Dutch railway in the 1840s to save lives today.
That is the ultimate takeaway here. Sound isn't magic. It is a longitudinal mechanical wave. It fundamentally cannot travel through a vacuum. It travels fastest in tightly packed solids. Pitch and loudness are completely independent of each other. And the Doppler effect isn't just train trivia. It is the literal mechanism allowing us to see inside the human cardiovascular system.
You aren't just memorizing formulas. You are learning the mechanical language of the body.
Well, whether you're tackling the TEAS or HESI exams this week, or you just wanted to finally know the truth about those space battles, I hope you walk away feeling far more engaged with the invisible world of energy pulsing around us.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own. Our source briefly touches on destructive interference, the phenomenon where two identical waves overlap perfectly out of phase.
What happens then?
The peak of one wave hits the trough of the other, their amplitudes cancel each other out, and the sound physically disappears.
Oh, that's how noise-canceling headphones work, right? A tiny microphone reads the outside noise, and a speaker plays the exact inverse wave to kill it.
That is exactly the mechanism. But think about the implications if we could scale that physics up.
Scale it up how?
Imagine projecting the precise inverse sound waves of an entire room to create perfectly silent, invisible acoustic force fields around a patient's bed in a chaotic, constantly beeping intensive care unit.
Oh, wow.
Or projecting one around your apartment window on a bustling city block. The theoretical physics to do that is completely sound.
No pun intended.
Right. But what would it mean for human psychology, or for a patient's fundamental ability to heal, if we could use destructive interference to simply erase the noise of the modern world on demand?
An invisible acoustic force field. That is wildly cool, and honestly, way more useful than a loud explosion in the vacuum of space.
Yeah.
Keep pondering that physics, and keep questioning what you hear.